even recognize the other believers, the Christians, those who are the Sabians, and many others, who they are faithful, then they will also receive reward from, from our Lord. It's not at all time when the Christians in the Jews are mentioned in the Quran, they are lumped together as doomed to hell. No, there are Christians in Nasara and Yahud. Christians in other groups are categorized um, according to the level of righteousness. You can be Christian, but you are not necessarily righteous. Just as you may not even say you are Christian, but you are righteous. In the first place, God does not look at our what we say, but our hearts. How Christians view suicide? Suicidal. Of course, Christians view this with utter, shock and, and almost could not be expressed. Why religion is being used as instrument of suicide? Bombing. That it seems it has become certain point trend in communities that is heavily or strongly oppressed. There are always groups of personalities willing to sacrifice their life. Now, the next question is, would they be received with the so-called 70, how many holies would they receive? That is something that is interpreted as some orthodox, um, but on the other hand, the whole consequence of any non-struggle is not written in the land. Whatever will be the consequence of one's act is beyond human perception or determination. It is only in the hands, everything is in the hands of God. But there is, I think, basis for raising why suicide is a concern because recently, as you know, there were two or three bombing in Sulu. One that happened in the Notre Dame of Lord. The other was in somewhere in Ghana. Then another one also in Ghana. This was after the Arab. So, or will we be seeing this trend? Fortunately, the trend is that, accordingly, the Abu Sayyaf, or most Abu Sayyaf now, have returned to the fold of the Lord. So we just hope that this trend will continue. Another question. Why Islam is concentrated mainly in Mindanao in terms of hate propagation in the Philippines context? That was probably long time. In fact, it has changed now. And you have now new drivers of Islamization. In the past, the direction of Islamization was from Mindanao to the north, with traditional Muslims ruling the Prophet. But now, it's now the reverse. It's now the Talik Islam that are now the new drivers of Islamization, coming mostly from the north to the south. And it is quite a phenomenon because they are now uh, quite strong in number and even blaming traditional Muslims. Why are you not doing dawah? You know, um, so they are quite strong, even fanatical, because of their new faith. And they have strong network in many Middle East countries. Oftentimes what happened in OFW, we go to the Middle East, there are groups, Dawah groups in the Middle East who would visit, say, Saudi company. They would do like house to house. word OFW, and they will hold Dawah session. So there will be conversion on a regular basis. Then this converted OFW would return to their places in Pangasinan, in Batangas, in Bohol, in Bicol, in Davao, in Zamboanga, and elsewhere, and they will also convert to their own country. And later on, because they have the network in Saudi Arabia, they will build mosques. The later the Maranao traders would come in, to support them, and they would, connect among themselves. Then later on, you will find that they already are very visible in the community. If you look at Quiapo today, it's totally different from Quiapo in the 90s. Right? Go to Green Hills, it's the same story. In practically all major malls, in other like Changi, you will find Maranao traders. And what's quite interesting with them is that they remain visible with their job. They even maintain their own language, their own dialect, right? So thanks to the war and drought, the dispersal of the Maranao led to the massive, Islamization of the whole country. Similar with that happened in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, in Afghanistan, in Libya, thanks to those bombs, coming from the United States, that led to the dispersal in the diaspora of these Arabs. And these Arabs would not go to their own, to other Muslim countries. They would prefer to go to Turkey, to go to Europe, to go to America, and later on they will build new Muslim communities. It is making, therefore, Islam spread, you know, as fast as possible. So these are the conditions of the Ummah um, in our time. If possibly there was no Mindanao country, the Muslims were simply concentrated in Maguindanao, Mindanao, and Basilan. Then they would remain like a, a small community, pockets of community in Mindanao. So those wars, while negative, have created positive consequences in respect. This is a phenomenon that I told you yesterday that we could hardly, explain. We don't know the wisdom behind it, but it is a reality where the Philippines is simply a microcosm of the Muslim world in terms of this what I call the algebraic relation between Islam and the West. It's not a clash of civilization, according to Huntington. Huntington espouses the view that Islam will clash with the West. But that is simply looking at the negative trait of Islam through radicalism. But if you look at the positive dimension of Islamic engagement in terms of dealing with the West, you see that there is another impact of Islamization in America, in Europe, in Israel. Mostly this happened through intermarriages, through conversion, through, as I said earlier, um, when these Pakistanis and Indians were actually quarreling in their own countries, but when they go to America or Europe, they eventually become friends. And even if they were not good Muslims in their own countries, eventually they would become good Muslims. They would call themselves Shaykh, Ustaz, and so on. So it is as if that migration, while negative, but they import from their land, created positive impact as far as Islamization is concerned. How the historical dynamic and social reality of Islamic Christianity now impact the attempts of genuine dialogue on faith and culture? Well, I think the Silsilah is a classic case, as we have seen in the documentary, of how a a person like Father said, Father Salvatore, realized the need for dialogue, given the polarizations of Muslims and Christians in 74. Then the Bishop Ulama is another case in terms of serving as a bridge between Muslim leaders, traditional leaders, and the Bishop. So this institution helped in the bridging of both Muslims and Christians, especially during critical times of war, in forging the peace process. Next, in culture, how the religious and cultural practices intersect in the lives of Muslim women in Mindanao, and how are these practices seen as expressions of faith and cultural identity among them? Well, I guess the penetration of groups, NGO, women's group into Muslim areas, open up an opportunity for Muslim women to be able to articulate their sentiment in society that they were hardly able to express themselves. So, if you notice, there are now Muslim NGO run by women, and they are now articulating um, typical women's movement discourses, although with certain, intersections of Islamic perspective, including, say, their ethnic spheres. In the past, we hardly see Muslim women organizing. It's very rare. We say these things, we saw those things, but right now at least there are already many Muslim women's groups. How cultural practices and belief aid the enrichment of one's faith? Besides that, as I said yesterday, there is a continuing negotiation, an interfacing of faith and culture. They can relate in terms of enriching both areas of relation. They can go parallel, but at times they can also clash. The classic case, I said earlier, the tension between traditional Islam among Muslims in the Philippines with that new interpretation coming from the Wahhabi and the Salafi uh, groups. Is it good or bad? Well, it's a concern that is now felt by many Muslims because somehow this intensifies tension, heightens the problem in in uh, whereas they should supposedly unite themselves. Why should we quarrel on how length, what will be the length of your beard, what will be the length of your dress, whether it is right to say Bismillah Rahman Rahim Muna, or to celebrate Maulud, you know, um, and all this stuff, quarrel during Ramadan, particularly reciting of Taboo. Right? This becomes quite frequent. Every time uh, the Maulud of Nabi comes, there will always be problem, making, in fact, the experience negative because it polarizes instead of uniting. Right? So if the Muslim community could not unite even on their own festivities, how much more they are now questioning Christmas, New Year, and all these holidays, and so on. It is as if that everything that is happening in the world is always subject to criticism. If this is the attitude of the Ummah, or fine. While we say this is not significant.
Yeah, konti labas pa. Opo. DJ Chacha. And 10 final. 9% that we are DWFM.